On the coldest rain-soaked night, a feared king of the city breaks his iron rules to carry a dying stranger across his threshold. She's a waitress with a stab wound, a hidden drive, and killers on her heels. He's the one man who never let anyone touch him. Until now. Inside his fortress, an enforcer trains her to survive, a hacker finds dirty money in charity shipments, and a corrupt cop demands she wear a wire. Then the real shock hits. The traitor is inside his own table, and a rival plans to sell her at midnight. The boss steps into the gunfire, ready to trade his first touch for her last breath. Because once he claims, he never lets go. When love becomes his only weakness and her only shield, will this virgin king burn his empire to save the girl who bled at his gate, or watch the city take her first? Through the haze of pain medication, Fallon's vision swam in and out of focus. The room around her was all smooth surfaces and muted luxury. Cream walls, heavy drapes drawn against the night, and medical equipment that looked far too sophisticated for a home setup. Her fingers clutched at silk sheets worth more than her monthly rent. "Easy," came a low voice, steady as stone. "The stitches are fresh." Alaric Viscari sat beside her bed, his presence filling the space like a shadow given weight. His suit jacket was gone, crisp shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing corded forearms marked with old scars. One hand still rested on the pressure dressing at her side, careful but immovable. A distant crack of gunfire made her flinch. His other hand caught her shoulder, keeping her still. "My men handling the perimeter," he said simply, as if discussing the weather. "You're safe here." "Safe," Fallon repeated, tasting the irony. Her throat felt raw. "In a crime lord's house?" A slight tilt of his head acknowledged the title without accepting or denying it. Up close, his features were all sharp angles and control. High cheekbones, straight nose, mouth set in an uncompromising line. Only his eyes showed any warmth, and that was buried deep beneath layers of calculation. "Safer than wherever you were running from," he countered. "The wound was amateur work. Hunting knife, poor angle. They wanted to hurt, not kill." His jaw tightened. Yet. Another burst of gunfire. Closer this time. Fallon's heart jumped, but Alaric didn't even blink. "They'll be dealt with," he said, with quiet finality. "Now tell me what they wanted." Before Fallon could answer, the door opened soundlessly. A woman slipped in. Tall, angular, dressed in black from neck to boots. She moved like a cat in a room full of lasers, all precise steps and wary eyes. "Sable," Alaric greeted her without looking away from Fallon. "Report." "Apron's clean on the surface," Sable said, propping herself against the wall. "But the stitching's interesting. Someone took apart the hem and re-sewed it. Recently." She raised an eyebrow at Fallon. "Amateur work, like the stabbing. But what's inside is professional grade." Fallon's fingers twisted in the sheets. "I didn't know what it was, just that it was important enough to kill for." "When?" Alaric asked. 3 days ago. Regular shift at the diner. Guy comes in, leaves his jacket. Inside pocket has this folded paper. Looked like accounting stuff. Numbers, codes." Fallon swallowed hard. "He comes back an hour later with friends. Armed friends. I'd already hidden it by then." "In the apron," Sable filled in. "Smart. Hidden in plain sight." "They tore apart my apartment looking for it," Fallon continued. "Followed me after shifts. Tonight they got tired of waiting." Her hand drifted to her side, but Alaric's fingers tightened slightly on the bandage, stopping her from touching it. "The diner," he said. "Which one?" "Lou's place, off Morrison." Alaric and Sable exchanged a look heavy with meaning. "Interesting territory," Sable murmured. "Indeed." Alaric's thumb moved in a small circle over the bandage, so subtle Fallon wasn't sure he knew he was doing it. "Get me everything on the staff, customers, security footage. 3 days back." Sable pushed off the wall with a nod. "Already running." "Oh, and boss?" She paused at the door. "Perimeter's clean now, 6 hostiles down, no ID yet." "Keep me updated." Alaric dismissed her with a slight gesture. The door clicked shut, leaving Fallon alone with him again. The medication was pulling her under, making the edges of the world soft and dark, but she forced her eyes to stay on his face. "Why are you helping me?" His expression didn't change, but something shifted in those cold blue eyes. "You bled at my gate," he said simply. "That makes you my responsibility until this ends. And then? Then you'll be free to go." His voice held no emotion, but his hand on the bandage remained gentle. "If you choose to." Fallon wanted to ask what he meant by that, but exhaustion was winning. The last thing she saw before sleep took her was Alaric's face, unchanged in its control, except for that buried warmth in his eyes, watching over her like a sentinel carved from ice and steel. Through her fading consciousness, she heard the whisper of fabric as he leaned closer, felt the brush of his breath against her ear. "Rest," he murmured, the word somewhere between order and comfort. "I'll be here when you wake." More gunshots in the distance, but they seemed muffled now, unimportant. Fallon drifted off to the steady pressure of his hand on her wound, the weight of his protection wrapping around her like armor. Her last coherent thought was that she should be terrified. Of him, of this place, of whatever was hidden in that apron's seams. Instead, she felt safe for the first time in days. There was something both comforting and terrifying in that realization, but she was too far gone to examine it closely. Sleep pulled her under completely, deep and dreamless, while Alaric maintained his vigil beside her, his touch never leaving her side, his eyes never leaving her face. The storm's rumble faded to white noise against the estate's thick walls. Fallon woke to the steady beep of medical equipment, her mind fighting through anesthetic fog. A heart monitor clip gripped her finger, its wire snaking up to a digital readout. No restraints bound her wrists, but the door's biometric panel glowed red, its sensor waiting for an authorized palm print. She tested her legs, wincing at the pull of stitches. The suite was elegant but fortified. Reinforced windows, cameras in the corners, panic buttons by the bed. Everything spoke of protection wrapped in luxury, a gilded cage. "The locks are networked to my biosignature." Alaric's voice came from the doorway, quiet but carrying. He entered with measured steps, his presence filling the space. "For your safety." "You mean my containment?" Fallon countered, watching him settle into a leather chair beside her bed. "If I wanted you contained, you'd be in the secure wing." His eyes were winter cold, but not cruel. "Your name?" "Fallon Reed." "Employer?" "Lou's Diner, off Morrison. Night shift waitress." "Who stabbed you?" She pressed her lips together, and his expression didn't change. "3 men," she finally said. "Russian, I think. They'd been watching the diner for days." Cade Ferraro appeared in the doorway, his bulk blocking the light. "Boss, found a sniper on the north lawn, neutralized." He held up a bullet, its casing marked with a distinctive stamp. "Petrov's crew." Alaric's jaw tightened imperceptibly. "Show me." Cade passed him his tablet, security footage playing silently. Fallon caught glimpses of thermal images, men moving through the rain. "Tell me about the flash drive," Alaric said without looking up. Fallon's fingers twisted in the sheets. "My ex-manager, Tom. He came in during my shift 3 nights ago, looking scared. Tossed it to me behind the counter, said to keep it safe." She swallowed. "Then he disappeared. And tonight? They cornered me after close, said they'd make it quick if I handed it over." Her hand drifted to her bandaged side. "I ran because they said your guards would shoot anyone approaching without invitation." Alaric set down the tablet and touched a screen on the wall. Security footage played, showing Fallon staggering to the gates. Gunfire flashed, but not from his men. The shots came from the tree line where Petrov's crew waited. "They lied," he said simply. "Leaving now would be suicide. Petrov doesn't leave loose ends." "What's my alternative? Stay here as your prisoner?" "Guest," he corrected. "Under my protection, in exchange for honesty and the drive." Fallon studied him, the perfect control, the lethal grace, the unexpected gentleness when he'd carried her inside. "Until sunrise," she negotiated. Agreed. He didn't press about the drive's location. "Cade, double the perimeter patrol. I want eyes on every approach." "Already done." Cade's gaze swept the room, professional and assessing. "I'll personally verify. The rotation." Alaric's phone buzzed. He read the message, his expression unchanging, but something dangerous, flickering in his eyes. "Your apron," he said carefully. The hem contained more than Petrov's card. Residual adhesive suggests a removed tracker. "I didn't know," Fallon said quickly. "I swear." "I believe you." He studied her face. "But someone knew you'd run this direction." Rain drummed against the windows as Alaric moved his chair closer to her bed. The gun he placed on his thigh gleamed dully in the low light. It should have frightened her, but instead it felt like a promise. Not of violence, but protection. "Sleep," he said quietly. "I'll keep watch." "Do you do this for everyone who bleeds at your gate?" Something almost soft crossed his face. "No." Fallon wanted to ask more, but exhaustion pulled at her. The storm's rhythm and the steady presence of Alaric beside her created an odd sense of security. Her eyes grew heavy as she watched him settle in, still and vigilant, a guardian carved from shadow and steel. Through the windows, lightning illuminated the grounds where armed men patrolled. Inside, machines beeped steadily, marking her heartbeat. And beside her, Alaric maintained his vigil, one hand resting near his weapon, his gaze fixed on the door. The generators hummed, backing up critical systems against the storm's fury. Security cameras tracked movement through rain-slick corridors. In the command center, Sable would be analyzing data, hunting for patterns. And somewhere in the night, Petrov's men were regrouping, planning their next move. But here, in this fortified room, Fallon felt strangely safe under Alaric's watch. His presence was both commanding and careful, power held precisely in check. She didn't understand why he'd chosen to guard her personally, why his touch had been so gentle when he'd carried her inside. The medication drew her back toward sleep, but she fought it, studying his profile in the dim light. The set of his jaw spoke of absolute authority, yet his eyes held something warmer when they met hers. He was a contradiction, ruthless protector, controlled violence, careful guardian. "Rest," he said again, noting her struggle to stay awake. "Nothing will reach you here." Fallon wanted to resist, to maintain her guard, but her body betrayed her. The last thing she saw was Alaric's unwavering attention on the door, his hand never far from his weapon, ready to defend what he'd claimed as his to protect. Outside, the storm raged on. Inside, under the watch of a man who ruled his world with ruthless precision, Fallon drifted into dreams, knowing she was safer with this dangerous stranger than she'd been in days. It was a realization that should have troubled her more than it did. The morning sun filtered through bulletproof glass as a maid wheeled in breakfast. The silver tray held enough food for 3 people, fresh fruit, pastries, eggs, and coffee in a delicate porcelain pot. Fallon's arms trembled, trying to lift the heavy silver cover. "The boss insists on protocol, even for guests," the maid explained with a small smile. The medic arrived next, checking Fallon's bandages with clinical efficiency. "Healing well. Keep the stitches dry for another day." As the medic worked, Fallon's gaze drifted to the open door across the hall. The master suite stretched out in severe minimalism, stark whites, precise angles, military corners on an untouched bed. Not a single personal item disturbed the monk-like order. "Ready for your tour!" Alaric appeared in the doorway, his presence filling the space. He wore a charcoal suit that emphasized his controlled strength, but his eyes held that same careful warmth when they met hers. He guided her through permitted corridors, each step measured to match her slower pace. Security cameras tracked their movement while armed men maintained discreet positions at key points. "Why do you sleep in guest rooms?" she asked as they passed the master suite again. "When you have—" she gestured at the palatial space. Alaric's silence spoke volumes. His abstinence was written in every Spartan line of his private quarters, in the absolute order that brooked no chaos, no surrender to basic needs. Sable met them in Alaric's study, her dark hair wild as if she'd been running frustrated hands through it. She thrust a tablet at Alaric. "We've got problems." The drive was in her apron lining, but it's locked down tight. Old banking encryption, ghost accounts that loop back to both Petrov and a dead accountant. Worked at some dive bar that burned down years back. Fallon's spine stiffened. "The fire and ice. My stepfather's place." "James Reed," Sable said, fingers flying over her keyboard. "Lot of interesting financial patterns before the fire." "He was a drunk and a gambler, but he wasn't dirty," Fallon snapped. "He raised me after my mom died, taught me books and numbers." "The accounts suggest otherwise," Sable muttered. "Enough," Alaric cut in, noting Fallon's rising distress. "Keep the drive," he told Fallon. "But you stay within these walls until Sable maps the complete threat picture." Fallon's hand closed around the small device in her pocket. "For how long?" "As long as necessary." His tone allowed no argument. They ate lunch in his private dining room, another elaborate spread that Fallon barely touched. Alaric noticed but didn't comment, simply ensuring water was always within her reach. The alarm shattered the quiet. Metal shutters slammed down over windows as gunfire cracked from the tree line. Before Fallon could process the danger, Alaric was moving. He stepped onto the terrace with lethal grace, gun appearing in his hand. A single shot rang out, precise, devastating. A body tumbled from the trees. Fallon watched, frozen, as he executed the move with cold efficiency. This was the man the outside world knew, death given form, violence made precise. Yet his hand had been gentle on her wound, his touch careful when he carried her to safety. The contrast stunned her. How could someone be both? Ruthless protector and careful guardian, controlled violence and measured tenderness. More security swarmed the grounds, but Alaric's attention shifted to her. He noted her pallor, the way she gripped the table's edge. "You're safe," he said quietly, holstering his weapon. "They won't breach these walls." Fallon found her voice. "Do you always handle perimeter tests personally?" "No." He moved closer, close enough that she felt the dangerous heat of him. "But they threatened what's under my protection." The words held layers of meaning she wasn't ready to examine. Instead, she focused on his hands. Steady, lethal, yet so careful when they'd touched her. The same hands that had just ended a life had also held pressure on her wound, had lifted her with impossible gentleness. "The danger isn't just Petrov, is it?" she asked. "No." His gaze held hers. "But nothing touches what's mine to protect." The possessive weight of those words settled over her as Sable burst in, tablet in hand. "Got another layer cracked. You're going to want to see this." Alaric's eyes never left Fallon's face. "Later." "But later," he repeated, noting how Fallon swayed slightly. "She needs rest first." Sable threw up her hands but retreated, leaving them alone in the aftermath of violence. Outside, men cleared the scene with practiced efficiency. Inside, Fallon struggled with the complexity of the man before her. Killer and protector, ruthless and gentle, death to his enemies, and life to her. "Why?" she whispered. He understood the question she couldn't fully voice. "Why such care? Why personal protection? Why her?" "Because you bled at my gate," he said simply. "Because you fought instead of begging. Because your honesty burns like fire in a world of shadows." Each reason hit her with physical force. She saw again the precise violence of his shot, remembered the gentle pressure of his hands. Both were equally true, equally him. A team leader appeared in the doorway with a report, but Alaric waved him away. His focus remained on Fallon, watching her process the layers of him she'd witnessed. "Rest," he said finally. "Process what you've seen. I'll have dinner sent up." She nodded, unable to find words for the tangle of emotions in her chest. As she turned to go, his voice stopped her. "Fallon." Her name was careful in his mouth. "You're not a prisoner here. You're under my protection. Remember the difference." The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the estate's windows as Fallon paced her room, counting minutes. She'd noticed the pattern: maintenance checks at 4, a brief flicker when systems cycled. The guard's footsteps echoed with military precision. 15 seconds between posts, 40 to complete a rotation. Her fingers traced the route she'd memorized on her morning tour. 3 corridors to the service exit, 2 camera blind spots during the power cycle. 1 chance. The lights dimmed right on schedule. Fallon slipped into the hallway, bare feet silent on marble. First junction clear, second coming up. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she pressed against the wall, counting seconds. The security doors slammed shut with a pneumatic hiss. "Going somewhere?" Cade materialized from the shadows, his bulk filling the corridor. No weapon drawn, but his stance said he didn't need one. "Fresh air," Fallon said, lifting her chin. "Sure." His dry tone called bullshit. "Boss wants to see you." She considered running. The look in his eyes said that would be stupid. Instead, she followed him through a maze of corridors to Alaric's study. All dark wood and leather, power wrapped in refinement. Alaric stood at the window, hands clasped behind his back. He didn't turn immediately, letting the silence stretch until Fallon wanted to scream. "Your photo is circulating," he said finally, voice precise. "Petrov's offering 50,000 for the waitress with the ledger key. His pet cops are calling you a fleeing witness." "I didn't know?" Now he faced her. "Of course not. But ignorance won't save you. Step outside these walls. You'll be taken within the hour." Fallon's fists clenched. "So I'm your prisoner." "You're alive." The words carried weight. "Which you won't be if Petrov's men find you." "I can't just..." She gestured at the opulent room. "Live in this cage. Then negotiate terms." That stopped her. "What?" "Set your conditions." He moved closer, but maintained distance. "Within safety parameters." Fallon's mind raced. "Self-defense training. Real training, not just basics." "Agreed. Cade will handle it." "Access to the kitchen. I need to work to be useful." "The staff will accommodate you." "And," she met his gaze, "the right to say no to anything that isn't about keeping me alive." Something flickered in his eyes. Respect, maybe. "Agreed." Just like that. Just like that. He gestured to Cade. Show her the training schedule. Start tomorrow. Cade nodded and headed for the door. Fallon followed, mind spinning at how easily her demands were met. Fallon, Alaric's voice stopped her. Next time you plan an escape, remember, those cameras don't just watch, they protect. The walk back to her room was silent. Cade left her with a grunt that might have been good night, might have been good luck. Inside, changes waited. A wardrobe of practical clothes replaced the borrowed items. A small key sat beside a locked drawer, and on her pillow, nestled in black velvet, lay her flash drive. The note beside it bore elegant script. Keep this on you. If you run, run toward me. Fallon sank onto the bed, studying the words. Not don't run, or you can't run, but run toward me. The distinction felt important. She changed into soft sleep clothes, noting they fit perfectly. The drawer key opened to reveal a burner phone, some cash, and a small taser. Tools for emergency, not escape. Trust wrapped in practicality. The flash. Drive felt heavy in her palm. Whatever secrets it held had gotten her stabbed, hunted, and locked in a crime lord's fortress. Yet Alaric returned it freely, choosing trust over force. She thought of his careful distance in the study, how he let her set terms instead of imposing them, how the security doors had sealed to protect, not trap. The cameras that watched, but also guarded. Outside, rain started falling again, drumming against bulletproof glass. Thunder growled in the distance as Fallon tucked the drive into her new clothes for tomorrow. Her fingers brushed the note again. Run toward me. 3 words that acknowledged both her freedom and his protection, that offered safety without demanding surrender, that recognized her strength while extending his. The room felt different now. Still a cage, perhaps, but one with purpose. Tomorrow she'd start training, learning to defend herself. She'd work in the kitchen, maintain some normalcy, and she'd try to understand the man who killed without hesitation but negotiated with respect, who commanded an empire but returned her only leverage. Lightning flashed, briefly illuminating the grounds where men patrolled in the rain. Somewhere in the estate, Alaric was probably still working, directing his deadly orchestra of protection and power, planning, watching, guarding. Fallon touched the drawer key, the new clothes, the note, each a piece of agency given freely, each a choice rather than a command, each a thread connecting her to the dangerous man who'd lifted her so carefully through his gates. The storm settled in for the night, but inside the estate's walls, Fallon found herself relaxing for the first time since she'd staggered to those gates. Tomorrow would bring training with Cade, kitchen work, and probably more revelations about the drive's contents. But tonight, she was safe, protected but not imprisoned, guarded but not owned. She slipped the note into the drawer, but its words echoed in her mind as she drifted off. Run toward me, a promise wrapped in permission, a shelter offered, not imposed, a choice that felt somehow like freedom. The morning sun streaked through the conservatory's glass panels, casting long shadows across the training mats. Cade circled Fallon, a practice blade glinting in his hand. Again, he commanded. This time, watch my shoulder, not the knife. Fallon nodded, sweat dampening her temple. Her arms ached from an hour of repetitive blocks and grabs, but determination kept her stance firm. From the balcony above, Alaric observed in silence. His blue eyes tracked every movement, the way she flinched when the blade came too close, the stubborn set of her jaw when Cade knocked her down, the flash of triumph when she finally executed a proper disarm. Better, Cade grunted, retrieving the practice blade. Your instincts are good, you just need to trust them. Fallon rubbed her wrist where the last block had jarred her bones. One more time? No, you're favoring your left side. We'll pick up tomorrow when you're fresh. In the kitchen afterward, Fallon insisted on cooking lunch. I can't just sit around being protected, she said, pulling ingredients from the industrial fridge. I need to contribute something. The chef had cleared out at Alaric's signal, leaving them alone in the gleaming space. Fallon moved with familiar confidence among the appliances, but her grip on the chef's knife made Alaric's jaw tighten. Without thinking, he stepped behind her. Like this, he murmured, adjusting her fingers on the handle. His chest barely brushed her back, but the contact sent electricity through him. Fallon went still. Alaric's breath hitched, an involuntary tell that revealed more than he intended. For a moment, they stood frozen, his hands ghosting over hers, the knife forgotten between them. Boss. Sable's voice shattered the moment. She strode in, tablet in hand, either oblivious to or deliberately ignoring the tension. "We've got something on the drive." Alaric stepped back, his composure returning like a mask sliding into place. "Report." The encryption referenced shell accounts linked to something called the Port D series. Sable's fingers flew across the screen. "Looks like Petrov's using humanitarian shipments as cover for laundering. Container routing manifests, doctored customs forms. The works." Fallon's expression shifted. "Let me see those ledger codes." Sable raised an eyebrow, but turned the tablet. Fallon studied the numbers, recognition dawning. "My stepfather." She swallowed. "He taught me bookkeeping basics at the diner. These are container tracking numbers disguised as account transfers." They gathered at the kitchen island, papers spread between them. Fallon sketched out transaction patterns, while Alaric and Sable added their own knowledge of Petrov's operations. Their hands brushed occasionally as they reached for documents, each contact sending tiny sparks across Alaric's skin. The kitchen filled with the scent of abandoned lunch prep and fresh coffee as they worked. Fallon's shoulder pressed against Alaric's arm as she leaned in to explain a routing sequence. He found himself distracted by the warmth of her, the way she bit her lip when concentrating, how her fingers traced paths through the numbers with unconscious grace. "Here," she said, circling a repeated sequence. "These containers supposedly carrying medical supplies. The weight distributions are wrong. They're using aid shipments to move something else." Sable whistled softly. "Proof we can use. I'll start tracking the pattern through other ports." Alaric studied Fallon's profile, noting the tension in her shoulders, the worried crease between her brows. "You're safe here," he said quietly, the words coming unbidden. "Because you are mine to protect." She didn't argue, just carefully folded the paper copy of their work and slipped it into her pocket. A precaution he knew, insurance, in case she needed to run. But the fact that she didn't immediately reject his claim of protection felt like progress. Sable gathered her tablet and retreated, leaving them in a silence heavy with unspoken things. The abandoned vegetables sat on the cutting board, the knife still held properly in Fallon's adjusted grip. Sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows, catching the golden strands in her hair. Alaric wanted to step close again, to feel that electric connection, to explore whatever had sparked between them during that brief contact. Instead, he maintained his distance, watching as she returned to preparing lunch with precise movements. The morning's training session had revealed her physical courage. The afternoon had proven her mental acuity. Both qualities stirred something in Alaric he'd thought long buried, a desire to protect that went beyond duty, an admiration that transcended strategic value. She moved through his kitchen with growing confidence, the knife skills he'd taught her already incorporating into her movements, small signs of adaptation, of trust built in careful increments. Each moment added another layer to the complex picture she presented. Survivor, fighter, puzzle solver, force of nature contained within his walls, but never truly captured. The smell of cooking filled the air as Fallon worked, humming softly to herself. Alaric found himself cataloging these domestic details with the same intensity he'd given her training session. The way she tasted sauce with her pinky, her satisfied nod when seasonings met her standards, how she seemed to dance between countertop and stove. These quiet moments felt dangerous in their own way, cracking through defenses he'd maintained for decades. Yet he couldn't bring himself to leave, drawn to this unexpected peace like a moth to flame, even knowing he risked being burned. The warehouse alarm blared through Sable's phone at 7 p.m., jerking everyone's attention to the docks. Security feeds showed smoke rising against the darkening sky, punctuated by muzzle flashes. "Petrov's crew," Sable confirmed, fingers flying across keyboards. Multiple entry points. Cade was already strapping on tactical gear, his movements precise and practiced. Northwest teams engaged, they're holding the line but need backup. Alaric stood at the window, shoulders rigid, his gaze flicked to Fallon, who watched the chaos unfold on Sable's screens. "We move in 5. Bring her." "Sir?" Cade paused mid-motion. "She's not staying here unprotected." Alaric's tone left no room for argument. "The SUV is armored. 2 blocks back, medical triage point." Minutes later, they cut through empty streets in a sleek, black vehicle. Fallon pressed against the bulletproof glass, counting emergency lights reflecting off wet pavement. The acrid scent of burning merchandise leaked through the air vents. The triage point occupied an old mechanic's garage, converted for emergency care. Medical supplies lined metal shelves and cots waited in neat rows. A handful of Vescari's men moved with military efficiency, preparing for casualties. "Stay here," Alaric ordered, his voice soft but firm. "Help the medics. Do not leave this building." Fallon nodded, already reaching for gauze and bandages, Her hands shook as she assembled supplies, but she refused the chair someone offered. The familiar motions of rolling bandages gave her something to focus on, besides the gunfire echoing off warehouse walls. Alaric lingered, watching her work. Without warning, his gloved hand settled on the nape of her neck. The leather was cool, but his touch radiated warmth. She stilled under the contact, feeling anchored despite the chaos outside. "I'll return," he said simply, then vanished into the night with Cade and the response teams. Hours crawled by. Wounded men arrived in waves, nothing critical, mostly grazes and smoke inhalation. Fallon worked steadily, passing supplies and holding pressure on cuts, while medics handled the serious cases. During a lull, she wandered deeper into the building, needing space to breathe. A small door caught her eye, slightly ajar, revealing flickering light beyond. She pushed it open to find a tiny chapel, barely larger than a closet. A single candle burned in a red glass holder, its flame reflecting off polished wood surfaces. But what drew her attention was the photograph on the wall. A woman with striking features and familiar ice-blue eyes. The same eyes that had watched her so carefully these past days. "My mother!" Alaric's voice made her jump. He stood in the doorway, suit jacket gone, holster visible under his open vest. "She died when I was young." Fallon didn't turn. "You have her eyes." "Yes." He stepped inside, the small space suddenly feeling smaller. This was her private chapel. I keep it maintained. Silence stretched between them, broken only by distant sirens. When he spoke again, his voice was different. Rougher, more personal than she'd ever heard. "I was 24 when I took control of the family," he said. "Young, untested. My enemies saw opportunity." His jaw tightened. "They thought they could control me through physical means. Tried to use my body as leverage." Fallon's breath caught. She wanted to reach for him, but held still, sensing the importance of this confession. "I survived, learned, made sure it could never happen again." His fingers traced the frame of his mother's photo. "I closed that door completely. No intimate connections means no leverage." "That's not how it works," Fallon said softly. "Choosing no one isn't the same as choosing wisely." She turned to face him fully. "The right person doesn't make you vulnerable. They make you unbreakable." Their eyes met in the candlelight. Something shifted in Alaric's expression, a crack in his carefully maintained control. Before he could respond, Sable appeared in the doorway, tablet glowing. "Boss, found something on the drive." She glanced between them, reading the tension. "Partial photo. Archive, mostly corrupted. But there's something you both need to see." They followed her to a workstation where she pulled up grainy images. A building engulfed in flames. An old bar, its sign barely visible through smoke. Financial records, lists of insurance payouts. And there, scribbled in a ledger margin, a familiar name that made Fallon's blood run cold. Her stepfather's name. The timestamp showed a date, just weeks before his death. Fallon stared at the screen, pieces clicking into place with devastating clarity. The bar fire, the mysterious insurance money, the bookkeeping lessons that suddenly seemed less innocent. Alaric watched her face, reading her reaction. His hand found her shoulder, steadying her as the implications sank in. Outside, the last sirens faded into the midnight quiet, leaving them with questions that would change everything. The candle in the chapel continued burning, casting shadows that danced across his mother's photograph. In its light, Fallon could almost see the path forward, through fire and blood and long-buried truths. But for now, she simply stood in the shelter of Alaric's touch, letting his strength hold her up, while her world shifted beneath her feet. Morning light spilled across Sable's monitors as her fingers flew over the keyboard. Fallon sat rigid in her chair, watching names and numbers scroll past while Alaric stood behind them, a dark presence in an impeccable suit. "Here's what we know," Sable said, pulling up a complex diagram. "Petrov's shell accounts intersect with payments made 5 years ago. The pattern shows regular transfers through Diamond Coast Holdings, a bookkeeping firm that serviced several businesses in the old warehouse district." Fallon's throat tightened. "My stepfather worked there." "Yes." Sable's voice softened. "He was listed as a junior accountant, salary grade 3, but the payments—" She hesitated, glancing at Alaric. "Show her everything," he said quietly. More documents filled the screen. Bank statements, wire transfers, all connected to a bar called the Red Door. Fallon recognized the name. It had been a neighborhood fixture until the fire. "The bar was a front," Sable explained. "Petrov's crew used it to move girls through the district. Your father's firm handled their books." "Stop calling him that," Fallon snapped. "He wasn't my real father." but her hands shook as she stared at the evidence. The man who'd taught her to balance ledgers, who'd made her chocolate chip pancakes on Sundays, had been part of something terrible. Alaric moved closer, his presence steady at her back. The previous generation of Viscari leadership was working to eliminate trafficking operations in the area. The bar fire was meant to disrupt the route. And my step and John died in it, Fallon's voice cracked. Was he a target? No. Alaric's answer was immediate. He was collateral damage in a poorly planned operation, one I would have handled differently had I been in charge then. She turned to face him. Would you have? Yes. His blue eyes met hers without flinching. I don't defend the mistakes made under my banner. I can only ensure the men profiting from human suffering now are stopped. A knock interrupted them. A silver-haired man in an expensive suit entered, carrying a leather briefcase. Ms. Reed, I'm Marcus Chen, external counsel for the Viscari Group. I'm here to establish protected communication and chain of custody for any evidence you review. For the next several hours, they methodically went through the drive's contents. Chen documented everything, creating careful barriers between what Fallon knew before and what she learned now. This protects you, he explained. Anything behind this wall can't be used to compel your testimony later. They moved from Sable's office to the library as the sun climbed higher. Fallon found herself increasingly aware of Alaric's proximity as they leaned over documents together. The wariness that had marked their early interactions was shifting into something else, a current of awareness that made her skin tingle when their hands brushed over papers. These routing numbers, she said, pointing to a sequence. They're familiar. John taught me this format when I was learning basic bookkeeping. Alaric nodded. Petrov's operation used standardized codes. Your stepfather may have been teaching you legitimate practices without realizing the larger context. Or maybe he knew exactly what he was doing. Bitterness crept into her voice. Maybe everything I thought I knew about him was a lie. People are complex, Alaric said quietly. A man can love his family truly while making terrible choices. Both realities can exist at once. Fallon looked up at him, struck by the understanding in his tone. Here was a man who knew about complicated legacies, about inheriting both power and pain. The tension between them shifted, vulnerability replacing their careful distance. At 3 o'clock, the medic requested Fallon come to the estate clinic to check her stitches. She walked the short path alone, lost in thought. The wound was healing well, pulling only slightly when she moved. As she left the clinic, a man stepped out from behind a hedge. Middle-aged, weathered face, cheap suit that couldn't quite hide the gun at his hip. He flashed a badge too quickly to read. Detective Harlan Pike, Organized Crime Division. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Let's talk about your situation, Ms. Reed. Fallon's pulse jumped. I have nothing to say without a lawyer present. Oh, I think you do. He moved closer, blocking her path to the main house. We've got some interesting charges that could be resurrected. Accessory after the fact, obstruction, maybe even conspiracy, depending on what was in that drive you're carrying. You're harassing me without counsel present, Fallon said, proud her voice remained steady. I'll be reporting this. Pike's smile widened. To who? Your new friend Viscari? That would be a shame. Might have to look deeper into your stepfather's connection to certain criminal enterprises. Lots of old cases could suddenly become active. Fear and anger warred in Fallon's chest. What do you want? He pulled something from his pocket, a small recording device. Wear this to dinner tonight. Get Viscari talking about his business operations. Do that, and all those potential problems disappear. And if I refuse? Then I start making calls. See how long you last once certain interested parties know exactly where to find you. He pressed the wire into her palm. Choose wisely, Ms. Reed. Some offers only come once. The device felt like ice against her skin as Pike walked away, whistling tunelessly. Fallon stood frozen, the weight of impossible choices pressing down on her shoulders while afternoon shadows lengthened across the manicured lawn. Fallon's hands wouldn't stop shaking as she made her way back to the estate. The recording device felt like a burning coal in her pocket, each step bringing fresh waves of nausea. The grand foyer's marble floors echoed her unsteady footsteps as she entered. Alaric stood at his study window, silhouetted against the dying light. He turned at her approach, his expression shifting as he read the distress on her face. Something's wrong. It wasn't a question. Fallon drew a shuddering breath and pulled out the wire. Her fingers trembled as she placed it in his outstretched palm. Detective Pike cornered me outside the clinic. He wants me to record you at dinner. Said he'd resurrect charges against me if I refused. Alaric's face remained carefully neutral as he examined the device. With practiced efficiency, he removed the battery and SIM card. Thank you for telling me immediately. His voice was quiet but carried weight. Loyalty isn't blind obedience. It's warning me which blade is coming and when. I couldn't, Fallon's voice caught. I couldn't betray you. Not after everything. His eyes softened fractionally. Sable, he called, and the cyber expert materialized from her nearby workstation. Pike's watching. We need location spoofing for Ms. Reed's phone tonight. On it, Sable replied, already typing. I'll have her signal bouncing between 3 coffee shops across town within 10 minutes. Alaric turned back to Fallon. We'll have dinner in the inner library. It's the most secure room in the house. The inner library was a fortress, disguised as luxury. Wood-paneled walls concealed steel reinforcement and thick carpets muffled sound. A white noise generator hummed discreetly in one corner while their phones rested in a lead-lined box by the door. Dinner arrived on covered silver trays. Herb-crusted salmon, roasted vegetables, fresh bread, still warm from the kitchen. Alaric poured wine into crystal glasses that caught the light from the antique chandelier overhead. How did you learn to count money blindfolded? He asked as they settled into leather chairs. Fallon smiled faintly at the memory. John, my stepfather, taught me. Said a good manager should know their till by touch alone. We'd practice after closing, him mixing up bills while I wore his bandana as a blindfold. A useful skill. What about you? She gestured to his cooling coffee. I've noticed you never drink it hot. Habit formed young, he replied. Business often interrupted before I could finish. Cold coffee was better than no coffee. Now I prefer it that way. The conversation flowed easier as night settled in. They discussed books from his shelves, childhood memories of summer storms, the proper way to sharpen kitchen knives, normal things that felt extraordinary in their circumstances. Sable appeared briefly to report Pike's surveillance team had logged Fallon's phone at all the spoofed locations. He bought it, she said with satisfaction. Signals showing you at a late-night diner now. As midnight approached, exhaustion began to pull at Fallon's edges. The stress of Pike's threat, the emotional toll of the day's revelations about her stepfather, all of it crashed over her at once. Alaric noticed immediately. You need rest. I don't know if I can sleep, she admitted. Every time I close my eyes, I see Pike's face. Something dangerous flickered in Alaric's expression. Pike won't touch you. Not while you're under my protection. He escorted her to her room, then disappeared briefly. When he returned, he carried a pillow and blanket. Without explanation, he arranged them on the floor near her bed, positioning himself between her and the door. What are you doing? She asked, though she already knew. Keeping watch. He settled onto the makeshift bed, gun within easy reach. Sleep. You're safe here. Fallon slid under her covers, watching him. His profile was sharp in the dim light, all controlled power and careful restraint. For the first time in months, she felt truly protected. Thank you, she whispered, for everything. He didn't respond, but his presence was answer enough. As she drifted toward sleep, rain began pattering against the windows. Thunder rolled across the distant hills, a low growl of approaching weather. The estate's automated systems hummed to life. Storm shutters whirred into position, securing the windows against the gathering storm. Fallon listened to the mechanical symphony of safety protocols engaging, her eyes growing heavy. The last thing she saw before sleep claimed her was Alaric's unwavering vigil, his eyes open and alert in the darkness, standing guard against whatever threats the night might bring. Thunder echoed again, closer now, but she was already falling into the deepest rest she'd known since this all began. The room filled with the gentle white noise of rain and the quiet breathing of 2 people who had found unexpected trust in each other's presence. Outside, the storm gathered strength, but within these walls, in this moment, there was only peace and the promise of protection. The storm hit like nature's artillery, hammering the villa with sheets of rain and wind that howled through every crack. Lightning split the sky, followed by thunder that rattled the windows in their frames. When the power failed, the estate plunged into darkness for 3 heartbeats before the generators rumbled to life. Fallon stood in the hallway, watching maintenance staff hurry past with flashlights and tablets. The guest wing's climate control had failed completely, leaving the air thick and humid. Her room was already becoming unbearable. The medic wants you close to the station, Alaric said from behind her, his voice carrying despite the storm's rage. The master suite is the only habitable option nearby. She turned to find him watching her with that careful intensity she'd grown to recognize. His bedroom was both sanctuary and statement, pristine, untouched, a monument to control. "Take the bed," he said simply. "I'll take the chair." The master suite was cooler than the rest of the wing, its separate systems still functioning. The bed dominated the space, its crisp linens perfectly pressed, like no one had ever disturbed their military corners. Alaric settled into a heavy leather armchair, while Fallon perched uncertainly on the mattress edge. An hour passed in companionable silence, broken only by thunder. Then came an ominous crack as the chair gave way beneath Alaric's weight, sending him sprawling with uncharacteristic gracelessness. Fallon's laugh burst out before she could stop it, bright, genuine, and slightly wild. The sound seemed to surprise them both. Alaric looked up from the floor, his usual stern expression softened by something approaching amusement. "Share the bed," she offered, still fighting back giggles. "We can draw a line down the middle, with respect." He stood, brushing off his dignity. "You're certain?" "I trust you," she said simply. The weight of those words hung between them as he approached the bed. He moved with deliberate care, maintaining distance as he settled on his side of their invisible boundary. "I should tell you something," he said after a moment. "I've never—" He paused, choosing his words. "My control hasn't left room for experience, only intention." Fallon turned to face him, struck by his honesty. "Because of your vow. Because I couldn't risk being used that way." His voice was low, barely audible over the rain. "Until now." "Until me?" She reached across their imaginary line, touching his hand. "Until you." His fingers intertwined with hers. "You make me want to break every rule I've made." "I want you," she whispered. "Not because you're powerful or dangerous, but because you've chosen me with such care, such patience." He moved closer, erasing their careful boundary. His kiss was gentle, questioning, giving her every chance to pull away. Instead, she drew him nearer. They explored each other with reverent attention, learning boundaries and preferences without words. When Fallon flinched as pulled at her healing wound, Alaric immediately stilled. "We can stop," he murmured against her throat. "No," she breathed. "Just slowly." So they continued with infinite patience, discovering each other in the storm-dark room. Every touch was a question asked and answered. Every kiss a promise neither tried to make pretty with words. Alaric handled her like something precious but not fragile. His legendary control transformed into careful attention to her responses. Fallon showed him how to touch her, guided him with whispered encouragement and soft sounds of pleasure. Their coming together was unhurried, a gradual build of sensation and trust. Lightning flickered through the windows, briefly illuminating their joined forms. Thunder rolled overhead, but they were lost in their own world of breath and touch and discovery. Afterward, they lay awake, listening to the storm die down to gentle rain. Water dripped steadily from the eaves, a peaceful counterpoint to their slowing heartbeats. "The vow I kept," Alaric said into the quiet, "was never about denying desire. It was about refusing to be reduced to a weapon, a thing to be wielded or bartered." His hand traced patterns on her skin. "With you, I'm not a weapon. I'm just a man." "A man I choose," Fallon replied, pressing closer. "A man who chooses me." The night deepened around them, comfortable silence broken only by falling rain. As the generator's hum finally quieted, dawn's first gray light began seeping through the windows. Fallon propped herself up on one elbow, tracing a line along Alaric's collarbone with a gentle finger. They smiled at each other then, real smiles, unguarded and slightly wondering at how completely they'd come undone in each other's arms. Their careful walls had crumbled, leaving something new and tender in their place. The storm had passed, but they remained entwined, neither willing to break this peaceful moment. Morning light slowly filled the room, turning everything soft and golden. For once, Alaric's perfectly ordered space showed signs of life: rumpled sheets, scattered pillows, clothing draped haphazardly over furniture. Fallon watched him watching her, seeing the way his usual sharp edges had softened. His hand still rested protectively over her healing wound, thumb stroking absently across her skin. She covered his hand with hers, holding him there, anchoring them both in this moment of perfect understanding. The rising sun painted patterns across the bed, highlighting the contrast between them. His scarred knuckles against her smooth skin, his controlled strength yielding to her gentle touch. They had recreated each other in the night's darkness, emerging changed but unbroken in the morning light. Sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows as Fallon reached for the coffee maker, only to find Alaric already there, methodically measuring grounds. "I can make coffee," she protested, sliding her arms around his waist. "You're recovering." His voice held warmth she'd never heard before last night. "Let me." "I'm not invalid," but she smiled, resting her cheek against his back. "And I make better coffee." "Debatable." He turned, drawing her closer, his usual precision softened by intimacy. The quiet moment shattered when Sable burst in, tablet in hand, face grim. "We have a problem. A big one." Alaric's posture shifted instantly, the lover becoming the commander. "Report." "The leak. It's internal." Sable's fingers flew across her screen. "Bruno Calderese." Fallon felt Alaric go absolutely still. "The consigliere? He's been feeding Petrov intel for months." Sable pulled up intercepted messages. Estate protocols, guard rotations, safe house locations, all while pushing that marriage alliance with the Rossi family. "Old world honor," Alaric said flatly. "He wants to force my hand." "By selling us out to Petrov." Fallon's voice cracked with disbelief. "By creating a crisis only traditional alliances can solve." Alaric's jaw tightened. "Where's Bruno now?" "Claimed a meeting with doc contacts." Sable showed a GPS ping. "Warehouse district." "Set up surveillance. I'll meet this contact myself." Alaric turned to Fallon. "You stay here, inside." She nodded, understanding the risk. He kissed her once, hard and quick, before striding out to gear up. Fallon was reviewing ledger copies with Sable when her phone buzzed. The message made her blood freeze. "Rosa's special tonight. Fresh cream, no sugar." "What is it?" Sable asked, noting her pallor. "It's..." Fallon swallowed. "It's my stepfather's code phrase from the diner. For emergencies only. Says someone can prove he wasn't dirty, clear his name." "Trap," Sable said immediately. "Has to be Bruno," Fallon agreed. "But what if there's truth mixed in? He'd need real bait." She showed Sable the message. After rapid typing, Sable grimaced. "It's a legitimate family emergency code. Bruno would have access." Fallon stood. "I'm telling Cade, following protocol." "Smart girl." Sable squeezed her arm. "Full security, no chances." Cade met her at the garage, already briefed. 2 cars, 4-man detail. You ride with me." They took the coastal route, Cade's SUV leading, backup vehicle following. The convoy split at a police roadblock. Routine traffic stop, the officer claimed. Except it wasn't routine. Smoke grenades erupted as unmarked vehicles hemmed them in. Cade swerved, but masked figures emerged from a service road that shouldn't have been accessible. "Estate route," Cade snarled, recognizing Bruno's betrayal as he reached for his weapon. Something cracked against the window. The last thing Fallon saw was Cade falling forward, tranquilizer dart in his neck. Then rough hands dragged her into darkness. Across town, Alaric approached the warehouse, instincts screaming. The perimeter was too quiet, the loading bay too dark. His phone vibrated. One new message, an audio file. He played it, hearing Fallon's choked cry cut off by static. Ice settled in his veins. Not a meet, a diversion. "Sable!" His voice could have frozen hell. "Burn everything Petrov owns, every front, every shell company, every safe house." "On it." Her fingers were already flying. "What about you?" "I'm going hunting." Alaric checked his pistol with mechanical precision. "The bunker where they auction special merchandise." "Find it." "Jesus," Sable's typing faltered. "You think they'd..." "Bruno knows her value to me now." Alaric's eyes were death itself. "He'll want to make it hurt." He moved through the warehouse shadows, gathering intel from the stage scene, tire tracks showing multiple vehicles, cigarette butts from hired muscle told to wait and watch, a dropped burner phone with partial messages about delivery schedules. Every piece confirmed his worst fears. This was planned, coordinated, and backed by resources only Bruno could have provided. The old consigliere had leveraged decades of loyalty into the perfect betrayal. Alaric's phone buzzed again. Cade, regaining consciousness, reporting the ambush details, the service road access, the fake police checkpoint, the precision timing that spoke of inside knowledge. "Track Bruno's movements for the past month, hot refrumas," he ordered Sable. "Every meeting, every call, every credit card swipe. Find the pattern." Already mapping it. Her voice was tight with focus. He's been regular at the Marina District. Weekly visits to a shipping office that's way too expensive for its declared income. Cross-reference with known auction sites. Working on it. That whole area is full of sub-basements and old smuggling tunnels. Perfect for keeping things quiet. Alaric methodically checked his weapons while she worked, each movement controlled, despite the rage burning in his chest. He'd let Bruno close because tradition demanded it, trusted him because the old ways required it. That trust had put Fallon in danger. The warehouse stood empty now, its staged drama abandoned, but it had served its purpose, keeping him away from the estate long enough for the real plan to unfold. Bruno had played on his predictability, using his own protocols against him. His phone lit up with Sable's incoming data, Marina property records, power usage patterns, surveillance photos showing known traffickers entering the shipping office after hours. Got something, she reported. Sub-basement access through the harbor master's office, power spikes every 2 weeks consistent with auction equipment, and Bruno's car was there 3 hours ago. Alaric absorbed the intel, building his approach. The familiar cold focus settled over him, turning emotion to tactical advantage. They wanted the weapon they thought they could break him with. They would learn what it meant to cage something he loved. Lock down the estate, he ordered. Full blackout protocol, then send me everything you have on that building, every entrance, every camera, every guard rotation. What's the play? They think they know what I'll do. Alaric's voice was winter itself. They expect negotiation, leverage, the old ways. But they forgot something crucial. He moved through the warehouse's shadows toward his car. They took what's mine. Alaric hadn't slept in 36 hours. He didn't need to. Cold rage was better than caffeine. Hit their accounts, he ordered Sable, who sat surrounded by screens in the command center. Everything. Her fingers flew across keyboards. Releasing data packets now. First wave targeting their shell companies. Within minutes, alerts cascaded across her monitors. Petrov's legitimate businesses started hemorrhaging money as regulators swooped in, responding to anonymous tips about tax fraud. Port authorities suddenly discovered safety concerns requiring immediate inspection of every Petrov-linked container. Pike's evidence package just landed at Internal Affairs, Sable reported, allowing herself a small smile. Full recording of his attempted coercion, plus his financial connections to Petrov's organization. Alaric nodded, checking his phone as another piece fell into place. The detective who'd threatened Fallon would spend his next few years explaining himself to federal investigators. Heavy footsteps echoed down the hall. Kate appeared, dragging a bound figure whose expensive suit was now wrinkled and bloody. Bruno Calderese, consigliere of the Viscari family for 3 decades, looked smaller somehow. His silver hair was disheveled, his usual dignity stripped away. But pride still straightened his spine as Cade forced him to his knees. You have one chance, Alaric said quietly, for a clean end. Tell me where they're keeping her. Bruno's laugh was bitter. You proved my point, you know. Look how love has weakened you. The Alaric I knew would have killed me immediately. The Alaric you knew was a weapon you helped forge. He kept his voice even. Now tell me where she is before Petrov moves her. You don't understand. Bruno shook his head. This was for the family, for tradition. I arranged everything to frighten you back to the old ways. The marriage alliance would have secured our position for generations. The location, Bruno? The old consigliere sighed. The Marina District, underground bunker beneath the harbor master's office. But you'll be too late. The auction starts at midnight. Alaric checked his watch. 8 hours. I have a request, Bruno said. Give me cyanide. Let me die with dignity, not strung up as an example. You betrayed everything we built, gave them access to hurt what's mine. Alaric studied him. But you served this family long before I let it. The cyanide is yours. He nodded to Cade, who produced a small pill. Bruno swallowed it without hesitation, slumping as the poison took hold. A quick death was a small mercy that cost nothing but would haunt Alaric's dreams. Dump him where Petrov's people will find him, Alaric ordered. Let them see what betrayal earns. Cade carried the body out, while Sable pulled up blueprints of the marina complex on her main screen. Underground access through 3 points. Heavy security, but the cameras run on an isolated network. I can get in, but we'll only have minutes before they detect the intrusion. Show me the auction setup. She switched to a different diagram. Main floor here, viewing galleries around the edges, guard stations at each entrance. They're selling 7 lots tonight. Her voice hardened. Fallon is listed as ledger girl in lot 4. Alaric memorized every detail, plotting entry points and kill zones. What's our window? Bidding starts at 11. Each lot takes about 15 minutes. Sable checked the schedule. They'll bring her up around 11:45. We move at 11:30. I want 3 teams. Cade takes point on the main entrance. Second team hits the service door. I'll lead through the emergency exit. He turned as the medic arrived, carrying a reinforced trauma kit. Set up in the backup vehicle. Full emergency protocols. Yes, sir. The medic began checking supplies with practiced efficiency. Sable's screens flashed with new data. Confirmation on the guest list. 20 buyers plus security details. Heavy weapons likely. They won't matter. Alaric checked his own weapons methodically. Anyone who touches her dies first. Make that clear to every team. The command center hummed with controlled chaos as strike teams assembled. Cade returned, face grim, and began briefing the entry teams. Sable uploaded building schematics to their tactical tablets while running last-minute security checks. Alaric moved through it all like a ghost, cold purpose in every step. He'd built his empire on control, on never letting emotion rule his choices. But this wasn't emotion. This was simple math. They had taken what was his, and the price would be paid in blood. Sir! One of the tech analysts approached carefully. We've mapped all security patrols. They change shifts at 11:15. That's our best window. Good. Have breach charges ready for all access points. He turned to Cade. Your team takes out the cameras first. Create chaos. Drive them toward the kill zones. Understood. Cade checked his rifle. What about survivors? No one leaves who saw her face. Alaric's voice could have frozen flame. They don't get a chance to hunt her again. The command center fell silent as teams made final preparations. Body armor was checked, communications tested, weapons loaded. Every person there understood the stakes. This wasn't just about rescuing one woman. It was about showing the world what happened when someone violated Viscari territory. Sable's main screen showed a countdown. 4 hours until the auction. 4 hours until Alaric reminded their enemies why he'd ruled unchallenged for so long. 4 hours until the old ways died for good. He looked at the assembled strike teams, 30 of his best, armed for war. They expect us to negotiate, to play by their rules, his quiet voice carried to every corner. Show them their mistake. The teams moved out in silence, loading into unmarked vehicles. Sable transferred control to her mobile setup, ready to guide them through the marina's security grid. The medic did one last check of the trauma kit. Alaric felt the familiar, cold focus settle over him as he strapped on his tactical gear. They thought they could use Fallon to break him. Instead, they'd given him a reason to show exactly what kind of monster wore this civilized mask. Time check, Cade called. T-minus 3 hours, 52 minutes to auction start, Sable reported. Alaric chambered around. Move out. Mist clung to the marina at 11:58, sodium lights casting yellow halos through the fog. Inside the bunker's outer ring, Sable's fingers danced across her tablet, sending false alarms cascading through the security system. Red emergency lights strobed, and confused guards scattered toward phantom fire points. Northeast exit clear, she murmured into comms. Moving to Phase 2. Cade and his team sliced through the service corridor like shadows, neutralizing stragglers with brutal efficiency. No shots fired, just quick, silent takedowns that left bodies cooling on concrete floors. In stark contrast, Alaric strode down the main aisle like an executioner in a perfectly tailored black suit. No tactical vest, no visible weapons beyond the pistol at his hip. His footsteps echoed on polished floors as he approached the auction chamber. The room opened before him, circular, with stadium seating rising in dark tiers. Harsh spotlights focused on a central platform where Fallon stood, wrists bound behind her back. Her chin was lifted in defiance, but Alaric saw the slight tremor in her shoulders. Maxim Petrov lounged in a front-row seat, flash drive dangling from his fingers. The Virgin King arrives, his accent dripped with mock courtesy. Come to break your vows for a waitress? Let her go, Alaric's voice carried to every corner. This ends now. But we're just starting the entertainment. Petrov gestured to the drive. Shall we discuss the bar fire, the ledgers, how your predecessors burned out that trafficking route and left such interesting loose ends? Fallon's eyes met Alaric's across the space. She gave a tiny headshake, a warning. Petrov's lieutenant was moving behind her, pistol raising. Or perhaps, Petrov continued, we should talk about breaking kings, about what happens when celibate rulers discover their weakness, has curves and courage. Alaric moved with liquid grace, placing himself between Fallon and the gun. His jacket slipped off his shoulders as he spread his arms, becoming her shield. "The only weakness," he said softly, "is thinking she makes me less." The shot cracked through the chamber. Alaric's shoulder jerked as the round struck, but he was already moving. His hand locked around the shooter's wrist, twisting until bones snapped. The knife appeared in his other hand like magic, and then Petrov was gurgling around, 6 inches of steel in his throat. Chaos erupted. Cade's team burst through side doors as buyers scrambled for exits. Fallon dropped low as Cade pulled her behind a concrete pillar, cutting her bonds with quick efficiency. Alaric held Petrov pinned, watching the light fade from the man's eyes. Blood soaked his white shirt, both his and Petrov's, but his hands were steady as he retrieved his jacket and draped it over Fallon's shoulders. A commotion near the back drew their attention. Bruno Calderez, caught trying to flee, bit down hard on something in his mouth. His eyes rolled back as the cyanide took hold. One final act of twisted loyalty, denying Petrov's people the chance to parade a traitor. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. "Police raids hitting Petrov's fronts," Sable reported through comms. Anonymous tips landed right where they needed to, all channels clear for our exit. Alaric swayed slightly, blood loss starting to take its toll. Fallon pressed close, her palm warm against his cheek. "You're hurt," she whispered. "Worth it." His smile was faint but real. "I'm not leaving you." She helped Cade support him as they moved toward the exit. "Not now, not ever." "Good." He leaned into her touch. "Because I'm never letting you go." The medic met them at the vehicle, already pulling out supplies. Fallon held Alaric's hand as the bullet was extracted, her grip tightening with each stitch. Around them, teams secured the scene with practiced precision. "Status report," Alaric demanded through gritted teeth. "Perimeter locked down," Cade confirmed. "All hostiles neutralized, evidence secured." "The drive?" Sable held up the small device. "Got it. Along with their entire server, we'll know every buyer, every deal." Alaric nodded, then focused on Fallon. "Are you hurt?" "No." She touched the jacket still draped over her shoulders. "You made sure of that." The medic finished bandaging Alaric's shoulder. "You need rest, sir, and blood replacement." "Later." Alaric stood carefully, steadied by Fallon's hand at his waist. "First, we finish this." They moved through the complex as a unit, Cade on point, Sable monitoring cameras, teams sweeping each sector clean. Evidence disappeared into secure cases. Security footage corrupted itself. Any trace of Fallon's presence vanished like mist. In the command vehicle, Sable's screens showed police raids hitting Petrov's operations across the city. "Pike's been suspended pending investigation. The evidence packet hit every internal affairs officer who matters." "Good." Alaric settled into the back seat, Fallon tucked against his uninjured side. "Make sure the Port Authority keeps those container inspections random, but thorough." "Already done." Sable's smile was sharp. "Amazing how many safety violations they're finding." The vehicle moved smoothly through empty streets. Dawn was still hours away, but the night's heaviness had lifted. In the distance, more sirens wailed, but they weren't coming for them. Fallon traced gentle fingers over Alaric's bandaged shoulder. "You could have died." "No." He caught her hand, pressed a kiss to her palm. "Not with you to protect." The convoy turned toward home as first responders swarmed the marina, their lights painting the fog red and blue. By morning, the headlines would scream about organized crime raids and corruption exposed. But the real story, of love and loyalty, of choices and consequences, would remain untold. The estate gate stood open, a sight unseen for a decade. Work crews moved efficiently through the grounds, repairing damage from the recent storms. Fallon paused at the keypad, her smile widening at the small brass plaque that read, "Authorized, F. Reed." She pressed her palm against the scanner, just because she could. Green light. Approved. The kitchen had become her sanctuary over the past 2 weeks. Morning light streamed through windows that no longer needed bulletproof shutters, warming the marble counters where she'd spread out paperwork. Coffee brewed in the machine she'd insisted on upgrading, because if they were building a new life, it would have decent espresso. "Testing the gate again?" Sable asked from her usual perch at the breakfast bar, surrounded by laptops. "That's the 3rd time today." "It's still novel." Fallon shrugged, pulling mugs from the cabinet. Like watching a fortress learn to breathe. Sable's screens showed the careful dismantling of Petrov's network. Internal Affairs had suspended Pike pending multiple charges of witness intimidation and corruption. The humanitarian shipments now flowed through properly inspected ports, their manifests clean and verified. Archives almost complete, Sable reported, accepting the coffee Fallon handed her. Clean sections go to prosecutors, the rest becomes our insurance policy. No one moves product through this city without remembering what happened to Petrov. Down the hall, Cade's voice carried from the newly converted training room. He'd agreed to run weekly self-defense classes for the estate staff after Fallon argued that no one should ever feel helpless at their own gate. The sound of practice pads being struck punctuated his instructions. Alaric appeared in the doorway, his injured shoulder healing well under the medic's careful attention. He moved with his usual measured grace, but something had softened in his bearing. The weapon remained, but the man emerged more often now. "The workforce center plans are approved," he said, accepting the coffee Fallon offered. Their fingers brushed in the exchange, a small intimacy that had become natural. "Construction starts next month. We'll have the first training cohort by summer." The center would occupy one of Petrov's old recruiting grounds, offering legitimate work and skills instead of exploitation. It was Fallon's idea, fighting darkness with opportunity rather than just force. "The chapels. Ready?" Alaric added quietly. Fallon nodded, understanding the weight of the choice. No public ceremony, no display of power, just them, in the small sacred space where they'd first begun to trust. They walked together through the afternoon light, past the security station where monitors glowed a peaceful green, past the training room where staff members learned to stand stronger. The chapel door opened silently. 2 candles waited on the altar, unlit. Behind them, the photograph of Alaric's mother watched with eternal serenity. Fallon touched the worn prayer rail where she'd first seen Alaric's vulnerability. "I had papers drawn up," he said, producing a slim folder. "Joint access to the legitimate accounts, equal partnership in the workforce center, your name on the property deed." "Not ownership papers?" she teased gently. "Never that." His smile held warmth that only she saw. "You're not a possession to claim. You're the choice I make every morning." She opened the folder, noting how the documents emphasized partnership rather than control. Even the estate security protocols had been rewritten. She had full access, but it was given, not imposed. Together they lit the candles, one for each past they needed to acknowledge. The flames wavered, casting dancing shadows on the chapel walls. "For those we lost," Alaric murmured. "For lessons learned. For choices made," Fallon added. "And paths changed." They blew out the flames together, watching the smoke curl up and fade. No more ghosts, no more shadows, only the future they would build. Outside, laughter spilled from the kitchen, where staff gathered for Cade's post-training coffee ritual. The security feeds showed calm streets and open gates. Sable's systems hummed quietly, protecting rather than imprisoning. The transformation from rescue to rebuilding had happened in small moments. Daily wound checks that became tender rituals, sworn statements delivered with joined hands, police interviews where truth served justice rather than vengeance. They'd attended port audits together, rebuilt security protocols together, and slowly filled the once austere master bedroom with shared breaths and whispered promises. "To them, I'm still the weapon," Alaric said as they walked the courtyard path. "The man who ends threats and enforces order. And to me? To you, I'm simply home." He traced her cheek with gentle fingers. "As you are mine." The evening settled around them like a comfortable blanket. Staff moved easily through their routines, no longer walking on eggshells. The gates stood open to the cooling air, transformed from barrier to boundary, not a wall to imprison, but a line that said, "This far and no further." Fallon watched a security team change shifts, noting how they nodded to her with respect earned rather than demanded. In the distance, the city lights began to twinkle on, a constellation of possibilities rather than threats. "Dinner in 10, Cade called from the kitchen. "Unless you two want to maintain the mystery and eat alone again." "We'll join you," Fallon answered, smiling at how naturally community had grown in the fortress's cracks. "Family dinner sounds perfect." Alaric's hand found hers as they walked back inside, where warmth and voices waited. The weapon and the waitress, the protector and the protected, had become something else entirely. Partners who chose each other, every day, in a home built from trust rather than fear.